In the 1920s, young women lined up for one of the best jobs a working-class girl in America could get. Good pay, clean indoor work, and a skill that made you valuable. The job was painting watch dials with a glowing, luminous paint, so soldiers and factory workers could tell time in the dark. The paint was called Undark. It contained radium, and the company that made it knew years before it told a single one of these women that it was killing them. This is the story of the Radium Girls, and it's one of the clearest examples in American history of a company choosing profit over truth, one worker at a time. Radium was the wonder material of the early 20th century. Marie Curie had discovered it decades earlier, and by the 1910s and 20s, it was marketed as almost magical. Toothpaste, cosmetics, tonics, even radium-infused water, all sold as health products. Nobody fully understood radiation yet. What people did understand was that radium glowed in the dark, and that glow was profitable. The U.S. Radium Corporation, based in Orange, New Jersey, hired hundreds of young women to paint watch and instrument dials with radium-laced paint. The technique the company taught them was simple. Dip the brush in radium paint, shape the bristles to a fine point using your lips, then paint. Dip, lip, paint. Over and over, hundreds of times a day. The women were literally ingesting radium with every single stroke. Meanwhile, in a separate part of the same building, chemists and executives handling the same radium wore lead aprons and used ivory-tipped tongs to avoid direct contact. The company understood radium was dangerous enough to require protective equipment for its scientists. It never told that to the women painting dials down the hall. For a while, nothing seemed wrong. Radium poisoning doesn't show up immediately. It accumulates in the bones over months and years, mimicking calcium, embedding itself directly into the jaw and skeleton. By the time symptoms appeared, the damage was already done. The first signs were dental, painful toothaches, then teeth falling out on their own, then horrifyingly, jaws that wouldn't heal, bone tissue actively dying inside the women's mouths, a condition doctors began calling radium jaw. Some women's jawbones became so fragile that doctors could remove pieces of bone by hand, painlessly, because the bone itself was already dead. Radium was eating them alive from the inside, and at the time, almost nobody knew to connect it to the glamorous job they'd been proud to have. As workers began falling ill and dying in disturbing numbers, the company's response wasn't to investigate honestly, it was to protect itself. Company doctors examining sick former employees told them their symptoms were caused by other things entirely: syphilis, poor hygiene, unrelated illness. Internal company studies that did find a link to radium poisoning were quickly buried. Publicly, the U.S. Radium Corporation insisted again and again that their product was safe. 5 women eventually did what almost nobody expected factory girls of that era to be able to do. Grace Fryer, along with 4 of her former co-workers, sued the United States Radium Corporation. The case became a sensation, covered by newspapers across the country, largely because the women themselves were so visibly, undeniably dying in the courtroom, testifying about symptoms while barely able to raise their hands to take the oath. In 1928, the case settled. The women received compensation, medical care for life, and a public acknowledgement of what had happened to them. But by then, several of their former co-workers were already dead, and the women who won the case were still dying too. The radium already permanently embedded in their bones, continuing to poison them from the inside for the rest of their lives, however long that turned out to be. Here's why this story matters a century later. The Radium Girls case became a landmark in occupational health law. It directly led to stronger workplace safety standards and gave workers the legal right to sue for damages caused by labor conditions. It's one of the reasons workplace injury claims exist in the form they do today. But the deeper lesson isn't really about radium. It's about the gap between what an organization privately knows and what it publicly says, when telling the truth would cost them something. The chemists in lead aprons knew. The executives reading the internal studies knew. The company that told sick women their jaws were rotting from something unrelated knew. This pattern shows up again and again in different industries wearing different disguises. A product marked as safe by people who use protective equipment around it themselves. A company insisting there's no problem while quietly settling with the people who found one. The information usually exists. The question is always who gets told and how long the people most at risk are kept in the dark. The Radium Girls weren't just factory workers. They were some of the first people in American history to prove, in a courtroom, that a company could be held responsible for what it knew and chose not to say. If you found this interesting, hit subscribe, because next week we're covering another interesting piece of history that'll make you question everything you thought you knew.